Okay, so welcome to the show to my guest here, Michelle Perin of CAHOOTS. Thank you so much for being a guest on Captain Hunter's podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really glad. Just to fill the audience in, we had some issues here. I was on the phone for 4 hours with our lovely government officials here and still didn't get anywhere. So, but we're going to press on, and I want to thank Miss Perrin for being so patient with me.
Absolutely.
Things happen and life happens and all that kind of stuff. So, before we dig into the episode here, if you would just kind of tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, please.
hmm So I have my educational background. I have a master's in criminology and also just earned my master's in social work. So I have that blend of mental health and public safety. My professional background, I've been in public safety most of my adult life and then went into mental health. I started with CAHOOTS in 2016 as an EMT. And then I cross-trained into the role of EMT and crisis worker. So even though I've been off in school, I've been going back and doing relief for them, and I'm returning this month actually, and hope to continue working with them also in a relief capacity. Although my main job will be in social work at the VA.
Okay, very good. So you've had a passion for helping people, social work. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been interested in mental health and the criminal justice system and kind of how they overlap,
Mhm.
um, and how they can work together and how they also, kind of work against each other. But always had a passion for helping people and just trying to bridge gaps so that everybody is getting the help that they actually need and solutions that are actually going to make a difference.
Yeah, very good. I'm actually considering going back to school for that as well. I don't know if I want to do the LPC thing or if I want to do the social work thing. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but I do have the
Mhm.
same type of passion that you do as far as mental health. I think I think it's very, very interesting how they do interlap and just the amount of people who are just dealing with the criminal justice system who are suffering from these different diseases, uh, and also just the whole people's upbringing and how that really translates
Mhm.
to how they turn out in life. And that's really, really just fascinating to me. And I think if we can correct so many different issues along the way, as far as people's upbringing,
Mhm.
maybe we can stem the tide of people being incarcerated and all that kind of stuff. So really, really
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. So congratulations. So you just got it. Is that
I
right?
did. Yeah, newly
Was it
minted social worker from Arizona State.
very good? Now, do they? And you're in Arizona, is that correct?
I am currently in Arizona, yes, and
Okay.
heading back to Oregon end of the month.
Oh, so you didn't do it online. You actually went down there. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. I transitioned down here. My husband's from here, and was working here, and so I came down to finish my degree. And so it was in person for the first semester and a half, and we're the COVID class.
Mm,
So then we did get to go online.
mhm.
So we got to do a little bit of both. But no, I did in person classes, and it was an incredible experience to learn, especially about the social determinants of health and how um, adverse childhood experiences and things like that play a role. And where do we jump in to try to make the biggest difference?
Mm.
You think about the quote, about how it's easier to help children, than it is to fix broken men. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's definitely easier to try to guide children than it is to try to fix it once it's pretty deeply ingrained.
Well, I certainly believe that. I definitely believe that. Um, there were no schools in Oregon, or you just want to be closer to your husband?
So I did want to be closer to my head. He wanted to be closer to me as well. He was finishing out. So he actually just retired yesterday, 21 years on the Phoenix Police Department.
Okay.
So he, yeah, was interested in having me closer to him as well. And my undergraduate degree is from Arizona. So I've had, a lot of split between Oregon and Arizona since I got out of the service when I was pretty young. So it made sense. I wanted to go back to my alma mater. Have always loved it. So
Okay. Very good. Well, congratulations to him.
yeah.
Maybe he could come on the show one day. We can hear some stories here.
Oh yeah, he's got stories.
Yeah. I
That's
got to
really the
pause here.
reason why I ended up going back and getting my degree when I already had a master's and was working in kind of that bridge was for Medicaid. They didn't consider my master's in criminology a behavioral health. they would go back and forth and they couldn't decide what it really was. And so to bill for services, there was always a question about whether or not it was like a billable degree. And so finally I was like, okay, I'm getting tired of having this conversation over and over again. I'm just going to go back and get my MSW and then you guys won't have a problem with it. So really that was the main reason, because I didn't want to go back either. I'm like, I have lived experience and academics to back it up. Like, why do I need to have another, more letters behind my name just to be legit? But the system was like, you need to. And I'm like, fine.
Well, that's exactly where I'm at. So I'm thinking, here I'm assuming it's the same in Arizona or Oregon, but here in Connecticut, you have to have a degree in psychology in order to get your LPC.
Yeah.
To get your LPC. So I talked to one of the local colleges here, and I had to send them my transcripts, and they'll iron out a program for me based on my transcripts and all that. So I could take 3, 4, or 5 classes, whatever. But sitting in the classroom for 18 more months or whatever is not what I want to do. But 3, 4 classes, whatever, I can do that. But I just want to make sure that I'm on the right path. And just like you, I want to be billable, right? So I have, like you, I have lived experiences. I was one of the crisis intervention officers. And then, of course, I have 2 degrees in psychology. So I'm like, what more do I need to? So, but again, I don't want to keep having this argument with people. So I'm like, let me just go back and just do it. So that's where I'm at. Do I do the LPC thing or do I do the MSW thing? So I don't know.
Yeah.
How many more letters do I need? So I don't know.
Depends on what you want to do with it.
I guess.
Depends on, you seem to be the kind of person who really has a love of learning.
Yeah.
And for me, if it wasn't the expense, I would be in classes all the time. Like the cool thing about being, a social worker is the different therapeutic modalities and the different kind of trauma trainings, and especially working with the VA. I noticed, is that a Navy SEAL behind you? Is that what I'm seeing back there?
Oh no, it's the FBI.
FBI. Okay, I was like, oh.
No, I wasn't a SEAL. No, I wish, but
I meant the Navy logo, I should say. But working with veterans, there's a lot of kind of a mix between that medical and mental health as well. And so there's trainings that the VA will pay for that I can continue to learn, and the love of learning. But yeah, it was really the cost, or I'd keep going, oh, this is fascinating. I'm going to go take this class, and I'm going to go take this class. So ASU has one of the best social work programs in the nation. It's excellent. It was an incredible program. And I, coming in with, being a little bit older and having some lived experience, I'm like, I don't want to sit here and have you tell me a bunch of theoretical stuff that doesn't work on the street. I don't want to hear it. Like, I'm not going to buy it. I'm just not. And so there wasn't anything in the classes. There wasn't anything in what we were learning that didn't advance what I knew. And that I was like, cool. I didn't feel like I was regressing. So they have a completely online program. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can take, the classes as you go along. And
that would be great. I just got to make sure that it's going to put me on the path to be certified in Connecticut, because I'm not. That's the only question that I would have.
Yeah. So it's whatever the Social Work Association, CSWE, I think, it's a CSWE certified school. So it's going to be whenever you want to get some sort of certification through your state or whatever, it's going to be a school that they are going to check off as a legit MSW. Okay. So it'll transfer. Like I'm going back to Oregon. Another one of my classmates was going back to Michigan. One just went back to Boston. So yeah, it's a base foundation that you're not going. It's not one of those fly by nights that they're going to be like, sorry, it's not certified. It's a certified school.
Okay. And you still have to do hours though, right? As far as when you get back to Oregon to be licensed, or is it?
Yeah. So the licensure program, like that's going to be state by state. So once I get back to Oregon, I will take my LMSW, my licensed Masters of Social Work test, which I'm studying for now. So I'll take that, I'll get licensed. And then eventually you get the supervision hours and the direct practice hours so that you can test for your licensed clinical social worker, your LCSW, which means that you can work independently. And so that works a little bit differently in each state. Like Oregon actually has a mid-grade certification as well. And a lot of other states don't. They just have the LMSW and then the LCSW.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's all that's what I'm looking into now, is to figure all that out, how much time and all that it's going to be. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was actually corresponding with the lady from Central Connecticut State University yesterday.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Good luck with
any,
that.
yeah, well, thanks. So you're part of the CAHOOTS program. If you could just tell us what that is and how effective it is and all that kind of stuff, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So CAHOOTS, which stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek name that came from the beginnings when we are a division of Whitebird Clinic, which has actually been around since the 60s. And Oregon, is definitely very counterculture, very anti-establishment. And so Whitebird Clinic created a space, a medical clinic, a social clinic, a place for kind of that counterculture to be able to get support when they didn't want to get it from the normal agencies, whether that was the hospital system, whether it was the criminal justice system. So Whitebird Clinic was doing a mobile crisis at the time. Like they had created, because they realized they were already doing a phone-in crisis and a walk-in crisis, and they realized, a lot of these situations, people are not able to get to us, get to the crisis workers, and so we're going to go out to them. And because of funding, they weren't able to stay. They were volunteers. Everyone was volunteers. Because of funding, they weren't able to stay in business. And one of the original members of Whitebird was asked by the county to kind of come together when they were designing this long range plan for what public safety, mental health, was going to look like. And so he, around a kitchen table with a bunch of the other people from Whitebird was like, hey, if we were to just dream big, what would this look like? And they were like, wouldn't it be cool if we were embedded into that first responder system so that we could go take care of calls as they come in? Like we're getting things after the fact. Like what would it look like if we were alongside law enforcement, alongside the establishment? And they're like, yeah, I doubt it'll ever happen, but that would be cool. So they actually wrote it into this long-term plan that got put into a binder, as a lot of government things do, put up on a shelf. And one day somebody pulled that off the shelf and was like, wow, this is really kind of an interesting idea to have this have this mobile crisis unit that works with the police department. Let's see what that looks like. And so at the time, everyone was like, so you're going to be in cahoots with the police? And, on the police side, they were like, you're going to be in cahoots with a bunch of hippies? How is this going to work? And of course, both sides were like, I don't know. But let's see what that looks like. And so that's where kind of the name came about. And so CAHOOTS as a division started in 1989. Of course, it was very limited hours, very limited scope, while everyone kind of felt out what was this going to look like to be able to send unarmed mental health professionals on these calls that had typically been handled by law enforcement, because when so many other, deinstitutionalization and all of that, like had been stripped, all of those kind of things had been stripped from, the social fabric. The police department was the only thing left that you knew you could call them and they were going to have to come out and deal with it. Like they couldn't, just say, never mind, we're not coming. So that kind of started that way. And over time, they realized, there was a lot of training. There was a lot of um, kind of, circling each other, trying to decide how is this going to work? What are the roles? Like, all of that. But over time, everybody kind of realized, wow, when we separate out the roles and the professionals that do these specific things, that have these specific trainings, this actually works really well. The police were happy to, be allowed to do law enforcement stuff. The CAHOOTS was happy to do the mental health stuff, or the social, kind of that social network stuff, like the homelessness, the substance use, the resources, the connection, the connection with things that people needed, whether that was just a shower or, taken over to get their meds or something like that. And so over time, the relationship was just, it's a very symbiotic relationship and it works really well. And I think we feel like we're partnered together. The police feel like they're partnered with the CAHOOTS people. The CAHOOTS people feel like they're partnered with the police department, and it's expanded into a lot of other kind of there's a community, our court team, which the police department has, which was the community outreach resource team, where a CAHOOTS member and the police actually went out and they deal with the kind of, very specific things together. So it's a little bit of everything where we realize this is really a great way to utilize roles, and to utilize these, unarmed, differently trained, um, people to be able to handle situations that should never have fallen into the hands of the police in the first place, and they are happy to turn them over to us. So that's kind of how, and now we're 24 hours a day in Eugene. And there's two vans that run. One runs 18 hours a day, but we're going to expand to two 24-hour a day vans. About 5 years ago, across the river with Springfield Police, and they wanted to see what it would look like to be able to expand to another department. And that was interesting because Springfield Police and Eugene Police have very different cultures within them. The communities are very different. And so it was neat to see that this model can adapt to what the community needs, what the police department needs. It wasn't a one size fits all. And so that was really helpful in kind of this national interest, when we're like, it's not a cookie cutter thing. Like, we can tell you kind of what we did, how we frame it, and then your community decides what you want. And then you develop it based on that. We're not just going to drop, because they're like, yeah, this is a small, 150,000 people Oregon town that was very, very, known for being pretty alternative and, like that. So how is that going to work in, say, Philadelphia or San Jose? It's like, well, what do those communities want? So it's a really cool model, and I think it's really important, especially coming from a public safety background, that we are embedded in public safety, that we are a fourth arm of public safety. Like, you can send a fireman, you can send a medic, you can send a police officer, or you can send a mental health person, not after the fact. Like, it's not helpful to have crisis people come in and clean up. It's helpful for them to be able to just go and do their jobs as a fourth arm of public safety.
So there's so much to really talk about there. So let's talk about the community. How has the community responded to this type of thing from 1989 to now to 2021?
Yeah, the community is very, very supportive. In fact, especially since we kind of got thrown into the national limelight, they're super proud to be a community that has supported it, because in Eugene, we are paid for through the public safety budget. So this is all approved through the community. The community, is the one that is kind of driving that. And they call for us. I think there's situations where people would hesitate to call for assistance because they don't want someone to get in trouble. They don't want, it to escalate into something, that's bad for people. And they know that if they call for CAHOOTS, we're going to come in with a humanistic eye. We're going to try to come up with a solution that's going to be very client oriented. And so the community has this resource that they feel really comfortable with and they're really proud of. And the clients too. Like, we're well known. We do have a logo on our van. We wear uniforms per se. So we do have, we're marked so they can tell who we are. We do wear police radios. And so, we're very identifiable. And just because we are coming in with a solution driven, we're voluntary. We can't make anybody do anything. We're not going to, we don't have powers of arrest. We don't have powers of making you go someplace. And so that relationship is really important. Obviously, if somebody's a danger to themselves or others, that's one of the really good things about being in league with the partnership with the police department. We can call and have that power of coercion. In case somebody is, danger to themselves or others, like, we can call in the police to come and assist them in going to the hospital with us. It's not something that we can do, but we don't have to do that very often. Very, very small percentage of our calls that we have responded to alone have we needed to have police backup. And almost always it's a danger to self or others type situation.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to dig into. So you mentioned that it doesn't happen very often where people what's the call screening like? I mean, when people call 911, or do they call 911 and you guys just kind of handle it? How's that process go?
Mhm. So people can call I mean, we encourage them to call the non-emergency line if it's a non-emergency, just like all public, public safety calls. But they can also call 911. Like most dispatchers handle the non-emergency police stuff as well as the 911 calls that come in. So they are trained to be able to ask a few questions to determine whether there's a crime involved and whether or not there's danger to self or others. So they determine those things, and it's regardless of whether the person calls in and says, I would like CAHOOTS, like they can call and just ask for us directly, or if they call in and they have a CAHOOTS appropriate situation. This person is wandering into the street and they're swinging a stick and they're talking to trees. I want an officer out here. Like the dispatch is able to ascertain enough about the situation to say, I'm just going to send CAHOOTS instead. This is a CAHOOTS call. Just like if someone says, I want a police officer out here, my neighbor's house is on fire. They're not just going to send them a police officer. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to send you a fireman instead. They recognize what the most appropriate service is, even if citizens don't. I mean, if they insist on an officer, they're going to get one. But a lot of times that's not the situation. So dispatch over the years I think the biggest thing is they have through training and just understanding situations as they fold out. There's a difference between a perception of fear and a reality of danger. And so they have been able to kind of, I'm seeing in a lot of departments who are trying to create a situation like this, there's been so much training about everything requires an officer. Like that could turn into something that could end up being, well, everything's hypothetical. So what Eugene kind of learned over the years is like, okay, these are trained professionals who do, have training in situational awareness. They understand, a lot of the same stuff that the police do about making sure that they're keeping their distance, that, we position ourselves in a way that is not going to be threatening. A lot of that same kind of training, that person-to-person training that officers have. And because we're coming in voluntary, we're not bringing the power of arrest, and we're not bringing the power of violence with us, because that's just inherent in our police department. That you could be the most humanistic, calm, person-centered policeman or police officer, and you show up with that box. Like, you can't make that go away. Right. And so because it's a different situation that shows up, dispatch learned over the years that things generally don't escalate to the hypothetical. It could end up, whatever. And so they were able to send us to more and more things that would have originally been, no, you got to send an officer to that could escalate or whatever. And so we go to, situations that other departments kind of balk at because they were like, no way would we send a social worker to that call. And we're like, you can totally handle it, and we'll give you all these examples of how we have handled that. So dispatch has learned that it's okay to send the right responder, and that if we need help, we're going to ask, just like an officer would ask for backup. Like we're going to ask, and they come running. They're very responsive. They understand we're not armed and we're not trained and we're not going hands on. So we know they have our backs, that they're going to make our backup when we ask for it. And so that's kind of how somebody would get us through the public safety system, is just the same way you would ask for an officer or fire or EMS.
Well, I like that. I like that. And so when people see your uniforms, they're not associating, as you said, the powers of arrest, the power of violence, and the power of the state. They're not associating those types of things. And so many times we know in law enforcement, right, there's this, the suicide by cop kind of thing, where, and so obviously those types of things aren't happening, where people are getting antsy. And I've seen it so many times when I was working that, you see someone that, they're really having a bad day. And then as soon as we show up, and as you mentioned, it doesn't matter the demeanor. And I think I was a pretty calm guy, pretty nice, try to talk my hands, and they're just, as soon as they see that uniform, they just go off the rails there. So that's not happening when I see you all showing up, or the van showing up.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, there's that power of association. Like, that people are just, it's inherent, it's unconscious that they have a response. It's just like when you see lights light up behind your car, Like you have a visceral response to the situation. Like you can't control that. And whoever's behind you, they have nothing to do with it. Like it could be the best, worst, whatever, but you're having a response to it. And so people do have a different response to a different responder who shows up. Kind of like the difference between when a medic shows up versus a police officer or a fire. It's always that thing like, oh, people left firemen and they, it's just it's the role. Like, unfortunately, police have to play this dual role, or of enforcement and running into a violent scene. Like, you have to be trained to be able to be somebody who can do that, and that's an aversion to it. It's a human aversion to run towards danger. And so, to train somebody in that, like a soldier or a police officer, that training is very, very deep. And you can't just take that off. And so officers have to be trained in that role if we expect them to play that role in those, 1 or 2% of situations that are going to require state violence. But the other 99% of the things that they have to respond to, it's people are looking at them as, oh, you're trained to do this violence role. You're bringing your violence role into, you're bringing your gun to a talk. You have no choice. It's that dual role. So really putting, a professional role like CAHOOTS into that situation, like you have an alternative to that. And police are able to handle the things that they should be trained to do and should be focused on.
So the hypothetical, these things could go wrong. Can you talk about just a little bit about that? And has anyone been attacked or any of those types of things? CAHOOTS.
Yeah,
are you calling
definitely.
officers or workers? What do you guys just how do you refer yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of different names. Like,
Okay.
people call it Cahootians. We had one particularly delightful
Cahootites.
client who called us Cahooters.
Okay.
So really we just CAHOOTS, CAHOOTS workers, a lot of times it's what we're just responded to or responded as. So I believe so Eugene, after some, there was some debate about our numbers when we first started kind of hitting the national stage. And so they ran some analysis on calls over the years. And it's hard. It's like comparing apples and oranges. Like, if a call comes in as a check welfare or an intoxicated subject, or, there's a lot of hypothetical about whether or not that was a crime or there was not a crime involved, or, it could have done whatever. So whether it was a police diversion or a jail diversion, we can argue it is or isn't, until the cows come home, because we don't know what it would have been like if we didn't show up, or if an officer showed up instead. You can't determine that. So out of I believe we took 25% of the calls that came into the police department went to CAHOOTS alone. Like, they just sent us.
That's a huge number.
It is a huge number. They did, and I mean, I agree with their assertion that a percentage of those calls were only handled by us because we were available. We were there. Like, they were calls that the police would have said, sorry, we can't handle, that's not us. It would never have been a call. So there is a percentage of those that we went, but 25% of those calls that we went on alone, and only 3%, less than 3%, did we need to request backup from the police. And again, a lot of that is danger to self or others. If we go out on a person that is acutely psychotic, very manic, they need to go to the hospital. Like, they're going to hurt themselves. They're going to hurt. They're obviously needing psychological assistance. We can't make them go. A lot of times we could convince them to go, and we just go. Like, that's our job, is to explain things to people in a way that they feel they are empowered. And so most people come with us, but there are some that are just so acutely psychotic or suicidal and won't contract for safety, and we're not just going to leave them. And so we'll request officers to come. They do their own assessment. Granted, they listen to the information that we give them as mental health professionals, but then they also do their assessment. And so in Oregon, only a medical director or a medical, like a doctor or a police officer, can put somebody on an involuntary hold. And so we would call the officers out to basically put somebody on an involuntary hold so that they can force them to go to the hospital. We've never had anyone killed on CAHOOTS in the 30 some odd years that we've done it, and we've had very few like physical assaults. And most of those are because we got too close. Like we weren't careful with our situational awareness. We very infrequent. There's such a respect, I think, for what we're providing to people that clients understand we're here for you. We are totally just yours. We're here to come up with whatever solution we can. And because of that reputation, people, they don't want to hurt us. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot, of fighting back against circumstances, fighting back against things that you're helpless for. They have a tendency to want to fight the state, and police represent the state. We don't, so they don't want to hurt us.
Yeah, so even if someone's going through a psychotic break, they still don't associate that. Is that correct? I mean, so they
Yeah, they
still,
don't. We're not threatening.
yeah,
We are not associated with a known threat. And
okay,
so it's a very different situation. And over my lifetime, like being able to, having been with the, public safety, like I've gone on ride-alongs, I see how people interact with, as soon as an officer shows up. I also see it on CAHOOTS, like if there's an officer there or an officer shows up, like there's a difference in threat level, like people's feeling of safety. And whether or not it's valid, it's irrelevant. It's there.
right,
It's their
right,
perception of danger, and that situation is going to it's going to play a role in that situation. Like when we show up, there's really no perception of danger. Like they know we're not going to make them do anything. Even if they know we can call the police in, we'll tell them that. Like if this is a situation where I have to call for an officer to come help me, I will. But let's talk about this for a bit.
right.
So it's a reputation and it's a relationship. Even with people who have not interacted with us before, a lot of times they know about us, and it's the way we present ourselves when we show up. Like we don't have a giant gun on our hip when we show up. Like it's just not there.
It's huge. It's huge. It's
It's
huge.
huge. It's yeah, literally it is huge. Like if
Yeah,
you have somebody walking towards us, like that's what you're looking at.
right.
Because so many of us, and especially people who have a trauma history,
Yeah,
they are hypersensitive to any kind of danger to their safety and
right.
their environment. And so it's like you're just automatically bringing a person in with all the things that make somebody feel threatened,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's nothing you can do about it.
right. No, it's a valid concern. It's a valid concern, and
Mhm.
like I said, having done the job, I could see demeanors change as soon as we got in the
Mhm.
scene. And I'm like, man, I didn't make anything better. And I
Yeah,
realized that. I realized I
yeah.
didn't do it. Yeah. Yeah. So it comes out of the public safety budget. And
Mhm.
this is what people are talking about when they talk about defund the police, right? Take some of the money, some of the resources, and then allocate it towards programs like what you're doing. And as you mentioned, you've taken 25% of the calls, which is huge. That's more officers who can do motor vehicle enforcement or could be in schools helping kids
Yeah.
or can do whatever, right? So this is what people are talking about. So, I mean,
Mhm.
can you say a little bit more about defunding the police?
So, yeah, I think one of the unfortunate things is the wording.
Mm,
It's really hard. I mean, nobody wants to defund the people that make them feel safe.
right.
And I recognize too, like even having been in, kind of straddling both worlds, that I don't want there not to be somebody who can run into the violent things. Like I even like as trained as I am, I'm like, if there's like a school shooting going on, I'm not gonna go talk that person down. I mean, fine, get the gun away from him, and then we'll talk. But there are situations where there's no talk involved. Um, and so I think it's unfortunate when people hear the word defund the police, it's like we don't want them around, we want less of, and it's hard for particularly I want to say middle class America because we've been so indoctrinated on public safety means policing. Safety means policing. Like we have to separate those terms. Like what does it really mean to have a safe community? Like there's a lot of research that kind of goes both ways that says that having more policing doesn't make communities safer. And when you look at communities of color and those who are marginalized, like homeless communities and things like that, they definitely don't think having police around make them safer.
Mm,
So that debate over what does it mean to be safe, and defunding, I mean, I like the idea of reimagining. I like the idea of refunding those things that we've stripped the funding from schools, mental health, substance use, housing resources. Like we have to refund the things that are shown empirically to create solutions in the future. And that's one of the issues too. It's really hard to get funding for preventative because it's hypothetical. Well, how do you know this is going to make a difference? We don't have the statistics to show it because we're just hypothetically saying this person would have led a life of crime. But how do you know for sure? So I do think that reallocation of funding is important. And I think that, unfortunately, there's a finite amount of funding. There's a pot of money. There's not going to be more money to be able to, like, we want to keep this pie the way it is, and we want this pie. Like, that's one of the reasons why things got defunded in the first place, is because we've had to do more with less. And so at this point, it's like, how do we ensure that we have our public safety, our police officers doing what we want them to do, like the role that they are designed, without creating a vacuum? Like, we have to design these programs from the bottom up now because they got so destroyed over the last, 30, 40 years. And unfortunately, the only option is to reallocate some of that money. And the narrative a lot of times seems to be, well, there's going to be less officers, there's going to be less training if you do that. And I look at that and kind of go, well, why does that have to be true? Like, why, I know budgets, I know where money goes to certain things and stuff like that. Is there a way where, if law enforcement wasn't feeling threatened, because I think there's so much threat attached to this, like, they felt attacked because they were attacked. Like, fundamentally, law enforcement has been attacked, particularly over the last year, like morally attacked. Like, it's no wonder that everyone's wanting to circle the wagons. And so when you have departments, like, I very much have so much respect for Eugene's police chief Skinner, because he has been able to hold kind of those two truths where it's like, we have a job to do and we're going to do our job. I'm going to stand by my officers because we have a tough role, and I'm not going to back out on them while we are doing a tough role during tough times. But at the same time, I serve our community. We serve our community. So let's try to create something that maybe it's going to be uncomfortable on both sides. He gets flack from both sides. Like, he takes so much flack, but is willing to say, okay, well, let's see what we can do so that we're creating these things, and then we will need less law enforcement response in the future. But it's that vacuum right now that people are like, get rid of it altogether, or don't get rid of anything. And I think reimagining and refunding and having a partnership where both sides are not feeling threatened by the other, that's the only way we're going to make any kind of headway.
Yeah, very good. Very well said. Very well said. How many other programs are like this did you know of throughout the country? I know you said there's a sister city, Springfield, that's imitating it. Are there others?
Yeah. So Springfield, actually, it's CAHOOTS. So it's like, it's the same. We're responding from the same. It's the same program, different funding.
Okay.
So the county and then the city both blend their funding to pay for it over in Springfield. So I know that Olympia, Washington created a program based on ours. And the interesting story behind that is that their police chief was a rookie policeman in Eugene when CAHOOTS started. And he remembers being like, there is no way in heck I'm working with a bunch of hippies. You think I want hippies showing up on my calls? And then he realized over time, like, oh, like, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. And so once he became police chief in Olympia, he said, I want this for my community too. I want the right response to these calls. So they designed one. Denver has the STAR program, which is based off of CAHOOTS as well. We had a lot of places that came in, did ride-alongs, talked a lot administratively about how we put everything together, talked to the Eugene Police Department about how does this work with the partnership. And so they created theirs based on ours. And the last I heard, we had like 300 inquiries of different jurisdictions who were wanting to design programs based on the CAHOOTS model. Like, we had to develop a media team because all of us were like, we're just doing our jobs. Like, what do you mean there needs to be people to do consulting and and media and stuff like that? But we realized, oh wow, this, we're at the starting line of really making a difference across the country and the world. So let's be available and open about how, our struggles, our successes, our partnerships, And I think that in the next year or two, we're going to see so many pilot projects start. And I think the biggest hurdle that places are finding is that funding. Like,
Mhm.
where do we get the money for it?
Well, I mean, as we mentioned, people are stripping it away from their public safety budgets in order to do that. I mean, that's probably the biggest hurdle, right? And again, there's that uneasiness where people are saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't take away from the police because they need this to do that." But once you
Mhm.
start showing the numbers that, okay, we can decrease 25% of your calls, and we're not, housing all these people in whether the county jails or city, or less officers are getting involved in fights, which means less time they're calling out sick, which means less injury reports, and all the whole ripple effect of this, it's got to
Mhm.
be enormous, I can imagine.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I think it's looking at agencies like CAHOOTS as part of public safety. You're not
right.
defunding public safety, you're just funding a different division.
Mm,
Like instead of SWAT or instead of SROs or instead of traffic enforcement, you are funding a mental health component.
mm, very good. How many people have been negative towards it? Any pushback about this?
Um,
Particularly
I
with
think,
now what's going on, people are saying, "Oh no, we don't want this," etc.
yeah, I think the biggest, like I mentioned earlier, the biggest pushback is you can't take this agency that has this history in this one place with this one population, especially, I mean, we're very white. We're very, very white in Oregon. We're very, very white in Eugene. And so when it's being held up as this narrative of helping um, ease some of the issues with oppressed and marginalized and communities of color, they're like, why is this the thing that we're using? What do they know about that? And we've had to do a lot of our own relearning and narrative around our own biases and our own um, entitlement and privilege that we didn't even recognize we had as well. And so that's been really helpful. And so really and that's what we tell people, like, we're not just, we're not going to drop this cookie cutter thing into your community. Like, this is, you build it up from your grassroots. You already have departments and agencies and people who are doing this work. You just have to bring them together and you have to fund them. Like, we're not trying to recreate ourselves like anywhere. And so a lot of that pushback, once we say, no, we just want to help you design your own thing, like answer questions. And especially when we have that history behind us, we're not new. Like, so when people are like, oh, well, that may work for a couple of years, we're like, no, it actually works for like 30. And so we've shown there's a longitudinal aspect to us that you don't have anywhere else. And so there's a lot of power in that, to say that this is sustainable. It is, and it's expandable, it's flexible. And I think the other pushback that we get is only when people see us as an opposition to police. And we saw a lot of that last summer. Like, we had some tough dialogue and some tough um, energy between the police and CAHOOTS during the summer of 2020. There was a lot of, are you with us? Are you against us? Where are we at? Where do we stand? There was a lot of threat level on both sides, and we had to negotiate that. And I think the way that we negotiated that shows an example of how those kind of dialogues can be negotiated.
Very good. I appreciate very much what you just said about looking how to look in your own privilege. I think that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that um, communities of color have always dealt with. When you talk about middle class, before you talk about the middle class and policing and safety is the middle class, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
is what they've been looking at. I think that these marginalized communities, whether it's Black communities, it sounds like Oregon doesn't have very much of, or that's been something that people have had to really look at. White communities have really had to look at and say, this is a problem that of our own making, and how do we attack this? And so, if you have people who are dealing with mental health crisis, that can be or cannot be, well, it probably can be. Uh, the response to that can be very different. If an officer is coming from a community where he's grown up in a white middle class, he's responding to white persons in crisis. Now he's walking to crisis of people of color, LGBT communities, and whatever. So that can be a double negative response. So I appreciate you saying the fact that you're saying that this is a problem that we've had to look at. And I hope that all communities would look at that and look at their response, not only of just responding. It's one thing to respond to people with mental health, but it's another thing to respond to people who are suffering with mental health and are a person of color.
Absolutely.
Or they're white, or they're white female, or Native American female, or transgender, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, all these different things, and because now the officers' prejudices, implicit bias, are coming in, and that could amp them up and stir them up to a different level. You know, so I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, intersectionality is huge.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that we have been able to say, you know, when people kind of push back against, like, you don't have a whole lot of communities of color. You're right. But we do have marginalized and oppressed community members that we, like you said, the LGBTQI, the different, when you look at all that different intersectionality, we have a lot of communities there that we've worked with and have really good relationships with. So it's a matter of just saying, okay, we are meeting people where they're at, and I'm not going to understand how other people's intersectionality is coloring their reality towards the situation. Just like, there's people who aren't going to understand where I'm coming from, because we all have that intersectionality that's playing a role in our perception. And it's just really a matter of how do we appreciate and hold up this idea that people's perception and their lived experience, even if it's different than ours, is valid. Like, just because I haven't experienced this, I don't get to say it's not true. I don't get to say it's not real. And I think that's the thing where people are like, well, I've never seen that. I've never done that. And it's like, okay, great. That you're just one person out of however many. And if people are coming to me, particularly people of color, coming and telling me this is their experience, where am I to say it's not? I'm going to act as if, and I'm going to help them fight that battle if they want me to. Or we're going to raise up. Like, we have a lot of beautiful Ebony Morgan is a wonderful biracial CAHOOTS member who has really brought us up to this level of experience. Like, let me tell you how she has done so much emotional labor to help her colleagues understand things we didn't even know we didn't understand. Like, she is amazing. And so we're blessed with that. And I think that now when we go into situations, we don't automatically assume that we're connected. Like, that we're all on the same level. Like, we're understanding things about ourselves that we can bring ourselves down and go, you tell me what your experiences is. You are the owner of your own experience. How can I help you? Yeah. What is going to be helpful for you? Not it doesn't matter what I think.
It's incredibly important to have these different voices within administrations and within just the the first line responders, etc., because they can give you that perspective. And to think that, and it's one thing to think that you can walk into a situation and think, oh, everybody loves the police and everybody's this and everybody's that, and we're all one, and that's great for a textbook, that's great for a slogan, but it's absolutely not the truth. It's absolutely not the truth. It's not the truth. So, and I appreciate that you all have been open to that. That really says a lot, and that's part of the healing process and part of the process that gets us to that next level where we need to be. So
yeah, and it was really difficult. Like, it was painful. Like, we had to do a lot of internal changes, and there was a lot of pushback, and it was interesting to see it and go, wow, we're having the same struggles that communities are having and people are having, and we thought we were above that. We thought we were so woke. We weren't.
Yeah, I believe you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for dealing with my technical difficulties and
no worries at all.
My other stuff there. You've been very, very, very helpful. So if communities, departments want to get in touch with CAHOOTS to see what they can do about emulating the program or ride-alongs or whatever you got going on, how would they contact you?
Yeah, so they can contact us straight through Whitebird Clinic. We have a website, and there's a form on there for getting in touch with CAHOOTS. We're not currently doing ride-alongs just because of the pandemic, and we're still dealing with that. But if they want information, or want to talk to consulting, or they just want further media support or ways that we can help with just our experience, just get in touch with Whitebird.
Very good. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. I really, really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. Don't hang up. If your husband wants to come on and talk about some war stories, I'd love to have him sometime. I know he's probably going to enjoy his retirement. And is he going back to Eugene with you, or is
He
he?
is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're both. So yeah, I got a job at the Roseburg VA.
Okay.
And so he's kind of in this transitional period where, at first he's like, I'm going to get a job on another department. I'm going to do this, that, and whatever. And, all of us, all his loved ones were, maybe you did your time. Like, and it's a different world. Like, it's a different world than when you started. And he is a good man and a good officer. And it's been very, very painful for him. I mean, between he and I, like that struggle between, the defunding the CAHOOTS and the police, like our relationship felt that. Like it was really, last summer was tough.
Yeah.
And so, he's always been a firearms instructor and he's done that stuff. And we're like 8 years in the Marines, combat Marine. And I'm like, why don't you just go do firearm stuff? Like, go teach.
Yeah.
You are
teach,
retired.
Open up a business. Yeah.
And I'm working. Like, you don't need to go keep doing the street thing. So, but yeah, I'll definitely extend the invitation. He's got a lot of good things to say about, kind of how it's transitioned over the years and being with a department that has had its struggles.
Arizona. Arizona.
Yeah, Phoenix.
With
Phoenix Police. Yeah.
So was that was the department where they tackled that family? Is that the part? You know what I'm talking about? Right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, and that was what was really interesting is, and for me particularly is, I'm watching this video and I'm coming at it from, obviously I was a police dispatcher for 8 years and I was with fire EMS. Like I have been in the public safety world. It's not like I am not one of those crazy hippies on the other side who think that, whatever. And so I'm watching this and the emotional dysregulation that was apparent in that video, when they call it the dollar store video or the Barbie video. Yeah. And it was like, you're not in control of anything when you're in that emotional dysregulated state. Like, okay, anything else aside, like that was never okay, like to be that emotionally dysregulated for whatever reason. And I still had people within the police department and other things who were like, no, it was fine. Yeah. They're just being vilified. I'm like, are we watching the same video? Yeah. Like, and I don't know that you can, I don't know that can be fixed. Somebody who's that emotionally dysregulated. And so the chief really, she came out and, was not popular because she came down, she said, we're going to have this investigated, we're going to have this looked at, and they got fired. He got fired. You can't do the job anymore if you can't stay regulated. Mm. And so it was, but yeah, so Phoenix is notoriously cowboy. I'll just say that. And I think the reason, and they actually looked back in 2019 about starting a relationship with a mental health organization here to start a CAHOOTS model. They can't get back past dispatches. I'm sorry, but I need to send an officer to everything. And they're like, you can send these mental health people to these. Well, they're not going to be able to handle it. And I'm just kind of going, yeah. And I can give you a bunch of examples of how we did handle people swinging sticks. Kids swing sticks in parks. Like, it's like, it's not. Yeah. So I don't know. Phoenix has a long way to go to be able to be open to changes, and they're, have a huge communities of color, and they don't call the police. There's places here, when I talk to people about, the idea of public safety, I said, there are communities in Phoenix, they have their own safety because they don't call the police. Yeah. And the police don't go in there. So how are they? I mean, they're not exploding. They're not killing each other like Lord of the Flies. So obviously there is a system in place that's different than our idea of public safety, and it works.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know if you're in contact with any of those people, but I'd certainly love to talk to them to see who doesn't call the police and all that kind of. And as long as the community is good, I mean, I don't want to talk to any cities that's blowing up or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're calm. They're definitely places that, I mean, I would not have access because I'm they wouldn't talk to me, and
I
I don't blame
understand.
them.
I
But yeah,
understand.
definitely when you look, if you were to get a hold of some of the agencies in Phoenix that work with, the communities of color, they would be able to really help you. I mean, yeah, there's just like I can think of blocks, like areas where no, nobody goes in and they don't come out and ask for help, and they function just like, you know,
Uh,
upper class Scottsdale, except for they don't call the police for their neighbors and loud music.
well, I mean, yeah, that's certainly an interesting model. That's something that is something I'd like to explore because I know that there's a lot of communities, even here in Connecticut, where I mean, the police are the servants. I mean, they call the police if they, I don't know, they have their son got a traffic ticket or something like that. You know, that they don't call the police.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they find drugs in schools or whatever, you know, it's not an option to call the police. But of course, in the inner city schools, it's mandatory. You know, so
Yeah, it's really different. And I know that one of the models that I've always been interested in is, like up in Alaska when they have the village police officers, they're community members, and they have all agreed that they're unarmed. It's
mm,
relationship.
mm,
And I think that says a lot. It's kind of like how CAHOOTS has a relationship, so it's like there's places that do not have armed responders. And so, and they're not just chaos. You never hear about them because there's nothing going on. They handle things
yeah,
internally, and they have the relationships to handle things internally. I think that's one of our biggest issues is that, we're transient communities and we don't really know each other anymore, and we're afraid of each other. And that's a particularly white middle class thing. Like, I can't go talk to my neighbors. Why can't you just go over there and say, hey dude, like your dog barked all night? Well, I'm not going to go do that. I want the police to do it for
yeah, yeah.
me. How nice would it be to just say, no, you need to go talk to your neighbor? We're not going to send anyone out there. You need to adult and go talk to your neighbor.
I think that we've become. I agree with you 100% with that, and I'll let you go into this.
Yeah, no worries.
There's a fear of litigation, and I remember when I was dispatching, you know,
Mm.
for our PD, like I would talk to my sergeant, like, why do I got to send a cop to this?
Oh
And he
yeah.
was like, and he had the same mentality that I'm sure the Arizona and many other, I keep saying Arizona,
That's what.
that the
Yeah, we
Phoenix
are.
officer, that the Phoenix department had is like, you know, what if something happens? And that became my mindset, especially when I became a sergeant lieutenant. I'm like, what if something
Yeah.
happens? Right, so you become so scared of litigation that you know you're scared to do whatever. And after a while, when I was the radio room supervisor, I was like, listen, we're not sending the cop to that. I'll just deal with it. People would call us, I'm sure they did with you all,
Mm-hmm.
calling about, you know, it's 6:30 in the morning, I can't wake my son up to go to school.
You won't go to school.
I am not
No,
sending a police officer to say, you know,
I know.
but that takes a certain level of bravery to say, you know, we're gonna, you know, do something a little different here than sending armed police officers because you can't control your kid, or to whatever call that it is. And I agree with you that
Yeah.
I agree 100% with this program that, you know, police officers are taking on too much, and we just can't sustain this, and it's so detrimental to community relations and all that. So
Yeah, definitely. And that call with like the child, I mean, that's what CAHOOTS would go on. Okay,
yeah,
we obviously have a family dispute. We've got an issue that we need to like mediate.
right,
So we would go.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, we dealt with a lot, and we dealt with, a lot of, children, teens, older. And it wasn't just, we don't do, a lot of times people look at us as the homeless department. We're dealing with that kind of call. But we do, I mean, I've done everything from, sitting and doing counseling to, somebody who's, complete, has been a chronic alcoholic and is like, destitute and homeless in the street, to a high-end home in the South Hills because, somebody we would see as a white person of privilege is having an emotional breakdown. Like, mental health knows no color, no socioeconomics, no, like, people need help. They need support. So many people need support. And so a program like ours is like we can run the gamut of being able to just provide some of that social safety net.
Mm, very good. Thank you so much for coming
You're
on. I
welcome.
really appreciate it. Good luck going back into Oregon, and good luck
Thank you.
to your husband there. And if you'd like to come on, I'd love to have him. Love to talk to him.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I hope he's much success in his next career, whatever he decides that's
Yeah,
going to be. So
absolutely. I'm gonna tell him he's just gonna chop wood and go fishing
listen,
and
that's
be a
what it's
farmer.
about.
I know,
That's
right? Like you earned it. Like go
you earned it.
relax.
Listen, 20 years is not easy to come by, and why I do understand the love for it, but it's a different world now. And people always tell me, like I got out right before the shit hit the fan. And people always tell me all the time, listen, you got out at the right time. But
Yeah.
even I miss it. I really do miss it. I've actually put in for some Chiefs jobs. I don't think I'm gonna get them, but I actually miss it. I mean, I just miss, being in the mix there. But I don't want to go back on the street. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to help him kind of see that he has an identity beyond patrol because he was in patrol the entire 21 years. And I said, you can keep serving your community. You can continue to even play that hero role, which I know is very ingrained.
Yeah.
You can do it without pinning on the badge and going back in a patrol car.
Yeah.
There's life out there other than that. So I'm trying to kind of merge him into like, you're a family man now. Just be family with us for a while.
That's a tough that really is a tough sell. And
Mhm.
I had a psychologist I was going to talk about because he dealt with that, cops who retired and didn't have an identity after they retired. So I got to find this guy's email address.
You know who else you can talk to? Ellen Kirschman. She wrote
Okay.
I Love a Cop. She's a
Okay.
psychologist. She's a police psychologist.
Okay.
She's a phenomenal woman. And
Okay.
she also deals with like across the lifespan type thing and the issue of what training and the job does to identity and
Yeah.
how it affects family relationships. And how to like negotiating that, even me trying to negotiate it with my husband, having the background I do, where like I understand why you're doing what you're doing, but you have to stop it because it's detrimental to our marriage.
Mm.
You just have to stop. Like it's
What is it?
I'm not a
Love a
threat
cop? What
to
is
you.
Love a cop? What is it?
I love a cop.
I love a cop. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
oh
gonna
she's phenomenal,
I
Ellen
don't know
Kirschman.
if you have her contact, but if
I
you could
do.
tell her. Oh, if you could just
I can
email it to me,
I'll email
please.
you it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I will.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, she talks a lot about, and she's actually done she does like post trauma retreats for first responders on the West Coast,
Okay.
and she has also done. She writes for Psychology Today and has done a lot of pieces on exactly what you're talking about, like that role, this whole role confusion that's happening. Like
Mm.
I'm a hero. Why does everyone hate me?
Yeah,
Like, what do
yeah,
you do with that when all of a sudden, I mean, police officers fell from that pedestal super quick because it was like pandemic, like, oh, you guys are, heroes, heroes, heroes. And all of a sudden, we hate you. Like,
yeah.
woo, what that escalated quickly.
I'm sure that your husband was around probably for 9/11, and we
Yeah.
saw, everybody loved us. Everybody loved us. I couldn't go to a restaurant without people begging to buy me, something to
Yeah.
eat. And now and then a few years after that, there was, a few scandals here and there, and then next thing you know, we were trash again. And now, pandemic here. Now we're back down here. So it's an ebb and flow, but yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I watched him go through, which was really interesting, is we had a shooting here in his squad area. And if there would have been a little bit of additional time spent before actual discharge, I think that the outcome would have been very different after watching it. I think that sometimes the threat level and the zero risk, high threat makes a response different than it would be if you took a little bit more time and you had maybe even a calmer disposition and a higher tolerance for risk. Like some officers have a higher tolerance for risk than some. Like some are, high strung. And so we watched this thing, and it was unfortunately a situation that uh, they thought it was a DV or may not have been a DV or whatever. And so of course the guy comes to the apartment door, and the officers are like, "Hey, what's going?" And they notice that he has, I mean, here everyone's armed, and so he has a gun in his waistband, right? And so the officers like get down, and I mean the way hindsight's always 2020, right? You can tell the guy's going to go down, but obviously the officer felt he was not whatever. So anyway, he ended up being, it was considered a good shoot.
Wait.
And
That was the one in a hotel? Is that
it
one?
was an apartment. Yeah, it was an apartment, and
Okay.
yeah, they were just playing video games. He was playing video games with his wife, and that's what happened. And the officer should whatever. But my husband afterwards, he came home a couple of days later, and he's like, I go to calls now, and especially if it's a family situation, and people are like, "Don't shoot, just don't shoot us, don't shoot him, don't shoot him," and it's like immediately, and he's just like, and I'm like, I get it. Like, I mean, I get it. But that's got to be so hard for you that you're automatically considered, like, you're automatically a predator when you show up. And he had a hard time with that. I'm like, well, what do you expect people to? It sucks. I wouldn't do your job.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just hard. And so I'm glad he's off the street. I'm glad that, we can start some healing because yeah, there's wounds. There's a lot of wounds from 21 years of seeing what he's seen and experiencing what he's seen. And I just really encourage him to get the help he needs and really just it's okay. It's okay to be a little wounded.
Very good. I hope so too. I'm sure he will be. It sounds like he's got a good wife who's really supportive. No, seriously, who understands that. Because some people would be just like, oh, just suck it up or knock it off or whatever. But to be empathetic, to understand, I mean, I'm sure it's your training and you just understand what it's like, So
yeah, definitely.
So that's important. It really is important. It takes a lot of detoxing. I retired in 2019. I'm still withdrawing. I'm still. I trying not to always have to have my back to or driving differently. I'm like I never let anyone else drive, but now I let my daughter drive, and just trying to really back off from this hyper vigilant mindset. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think our biggest issue, and I think that a lot of couples, police couples deal with, is that officers are trained that any kind of disagreement, any kind of assertive otherness is a threat.
Yeah.
And so I have to tell him, I said, look, I'm not a threat just because I don't agree. Like our differences are not a threat. Like, and so when you automatically, I can see you like tensing up and hey, you want to come up with a solution. Like you don't have all the info yet, but I get it. Officers have to come up with quick solutions without asking for all the info. Because I laughed at it. I said, how weird would it be if you were like social work mode and you get to a call and the person's telling the story and you're like, so tell me what the history of that thing is going to be for you. And it's like, it's not happening. You got to come up with a solution quickly with what you know. I said, it doesn't work in our relationship. So stop. And I am not a threat. I am not your enemy. Even if I'm disagreeing with you, I'm not going to attack you all of a sudden. I guarantee it. If I haven't yet, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, I'll let you go.
All right. I'm going to go back to packing.
Okay. Enjoy. Take care.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. You too. Thanks. If you can remember that, those people's numbers.
I will send it right away.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye. Police reform is more than just a trending topic. My name is Lawrence Hunter. I'm a retired police captain from the state of Connecticut, and I've written a new book called Police Reform. And I talk about the evolution of law enforcement here in America and what changes need to be made in order to improve the relationship between the police and the communities that they serve. Over the past few months, it has become increasingly more important and more evident that there's something amiss and awry between the police and the communities that they serve. So whether you're about defunding the police or defending the police, if you're about Blue Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter, no matter what side of the fence you happen to sit on, make sure that you pick up your copy of Police Reform today.